Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's 2 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started for today. Again, this is part of our ongoing education process for the memberships of Florida APCO, Florida NINA, and the 911 Coordinators Association. Some of this may be a review for some of you, some of it may be new information, but also as we go through, we're going to talk a little bit about how this affects us and what we need to do as a membership when looking at the legislative initiatives that we face in Florida. Okay, so obviously, very quick introduction again. We're just going to let you know a little bit about the legislative process, how it works, what goes on, some of the different hurdles that we talk about it. And when we reach out to the membership and we look for your help, what do we need? And why is it needed, and why are some of the decisions that the organization leaders, on we have Jody Kenyon from the 911 Coordinator Association and Kathy Lariano for Florida APCO, and they're basically the agency leads for each of this, and mainly just for a point of communication and a point of contact. Other than that, we're doing and working for what our memberships have asked for. So to go along the lines with the title of our education series, Know, Speak, and Influence. So the idea is, number one, why are we doing this? Why are we holding legislative awareness? A lot of it is what we do every day. Number one, the legislation determines the funding, technologies, responsibilities that shape 911 operations, technologies, and budgets. And when it gets to it, what we're hoping for is also staffing and benefits for our members. So when we get to that, obviously these changes, some are made on a local basis, but some are made at the statewide, especially when we start talking about Florida retirement system, length of retirements, even some local policies and local benefits packages mirror the state. So that's why we need to look at the state legislation so we can change it. And then influence. This is what we're going to be talking about for when you should reach out to your lawmakers, what to say. Um, when I learned in one of my PIO classes, also, even more important than knowing what to say is what not to say. So that's where we get into some of the different that we spoke about at our last session, some of the terminology that we look at when we talk about recognition, reclassification, and retirement. You know, we need to go to our lawmakers with a common message. So we're all using the same terminology. So if I go to a representative here in Palm Beach County and speak to them, I'm giving the same message and I'm using the same terminology that Jody would be using up in Pasco County. Because again, it's all local, but then they get to meet up in Tallahassee. And that's where we want to make sure that when we go to committee and when we get up to Tallahassee and when our bills are filed, that it's common terminology. And honestly, hopefully, our legislators know a lot of it about what we're doing before we get up there. So, very quickly, the legislative branch in the state of Florida is a bicameral, basically means two chambers in the legislature. One of the things that we looked at, this is as of June 35, excuse me, June 2025, sorry. And when you look, the Senate has 40 members, a little bit smaller, and the House has 120 members. Again, both drawn up by different districts that across the state. It may be a single county that they representative, or they may represent all or part of several different counties. Um, we did break it down by party because this is a lot of the conversations that we have. We do have a Republican-controlled legislature. Historically, they are more fiscally conservative, So that's why when we go to them for things about retirement and things that are going to cost money, that we need to make sure we have the data to show, if money is being spent, where is it coming from? Also, where is money being saved elsewhere? So, the other thing when it comes to bill sponsors, it's important because, again, while we have many people that, when we go to legislative delegation meetings, they're 100% behind us. And, we're great. We understand you do a great job. You do a great job. But again, though, it's better for us if we have a Republican sponsor and co-sponsor both in our House and Senate bills. It's a lot smoother and again, a little bit less headaches back and forth. So with session starts on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in March, as it did in 2025. And this year, it starts on the second Tuesday after the first Monday. Very simply, session starts on January 13th, 2026 this year, this upcoming year. And again, if anybody has any questions, just feel free to shout out or throw them in the chat. Okay, so here's what our committee doing, what we call the legislative policy group that's been going through for the past several years as we work for number one. We have the idea. We know what our members want. We know we're looking for recognition as first responders. We know some of the asks that we have are changes to the retirement benefits that we have, both for classification, as far as whether it be special risk or some other risk level, to raise the multiplier, and also length of service. Do we want to do the 33 years? Would it be nice if we only had to work 25 years and then retire? So those are some things that we're looking at when we get to our legislators in the beginning and we talk to them. Number one, getting our bill drafted. Because then once we do get the asks that we want, the bill has to be drafted and written out. A lot of legalese. We're asking for something that could be summed up in one sentence. Unfortunately, if bills are written, there's the history, the justification, and everything that we need to go into it. So it comes out a lot more. We're hoping this year, while this session starts in January, we would like to see a bill filed by the end of this year, in the fall to early winter of 2025. We believe that will give us a little bit more of an edge during the session. Next up, after the bill is filed, it goes in. It then is numbered. When you look onto the websites, if it starts HB, it's a House bill. If it starts SB, it's a Senate bill. Once they go in, the committees go in and review the bills. And that's after the committees are chosen by the Senate president and the House leader in Florida. That's part of what we look at as far as what bills come in, and we'll get a little bit more about the committees that goes on. But obviously, the committees are where we may ask our membership if they are in the area of Tallahassee, if they can make the meeting and go and speak at the meeting, we would appreciate that. If they can't make it up, we would hope that they could reach out to their representative's local office, especially when one of the committee members is your local representative. That way, again, while they do represent the state of Florida, they are elected locally. So they always take the information from their local constituents. And again, that's who voted them into office. So that's who they're there to serve, along with all the residents of Florida. And then third step is the governor's approval. That's after a bill goes through both chambers and it's passed in an identical form. Okay. The committee process, getting a little bit deeper into it. The key committees that we've seen in 911, we've seen Criminal Justice Committee, Government Oversight and Accountability, and Economic Infrastructure. Especially if we have something to do with retirement, we're going to see the economic infrastructure because there's a financial aspect to the bill. That they focus on the operational and financial impacts of the bill. Usually there is a bill analysis done by the committee that it's going to. That's where we need to be speaking to our legislators ahead of time and where we need to be speaking to their legislative aides ahead of time because that's where they get the full picture of what's going on. Again, while we talk about 911, when it comes down to, operations, yes, and financial impacts, yes, that's 100%. But as a conversation I was just having earlier with some of the 911 coordinators in the state, it's great, but there are times we have to staff because of what may happen. It's great. Last Tuesday at 3 to 4, we barely had any calls. Well, this Tuesday, there could be a structure fire. There could be a crime in progress. There could be a large accident on an interstate. So that's where we have to look at when these committees start talking about the financial impacts. Again, we are paid for what we do, and we're also paid for what we know, which is very important, which is one of the things that we have to stress to our legislators that, not every call that I pick up is going to be a CPR call, but I have to be ready and have to have the information available. So if it is a CPR call, I can give the proper instructions and hopefully, you know, restore the vitals and restore heartbeat and breathing to the patient and victim. And one thing when we talk about the Senate president and the Speaker of the House, um, a lot of it depends on the committees assigned and the number of committees is a good way to predict on the success of a bill. Again, last year we thought, luckily, we didn't receive a lot of committees, but unfortunately it was held up due to some behind the scenes disagreements and maybe some information and a little bit of misinformation behind the scenes. So that's why, again, we're going through this process to make sure we're providing a unified front. If we see a bill, if the bill comes up and we see there's 4 or 5 committees, there's not a very good chance of that bill passing just because it's only 60 days for the legislative session. So to go through 5 meetings in that time, not 100% realistic. If we only see 2 or 3 bills, that's a little bit better. And again, also the other thing too is if the committees are focusing more on like operational issues and not finance, that kind of leans towards a little bit better success for a bill. So with that, public input. This is where we reach out to our members to reach out to your neighbors, friends, coworkers, fellow first responders. But number one, we can submit testimony, write letters, or make calls. This is where, once we start talking, this is where we need the 911 personnel to talk about the stress of the work, to talk about the working conditions. And then again, also the survey is out there for the PSAPs. Honestly, I haven't been able to catch up and see who still needs to fill theirs out. But this is one of the things we had because also the real world experience, it means a lot. But in the background, though, and very quickly is the data. And that's what we're looking at as far as some retention and some staffing data to go in with the bill, along with the idea of, okay, we are handling these, you know, life-changing, life-saving calls. But now we're being a little bit more prepared this year with some data in the background. So we can make sure we have that because again, they are, they are legislatures, and they're going to be looking for data to make a decision, not really just emotions, unfortunately, which is obviously one of the reasons why we actually do vote for certain politicians, because yes, they do work off the emotion, they do understand what we go through, but also they're not going to be overly emotional, and they're going to do what's right for us in the long run. Okay. So in committees, this is also committee of the chambers, but in the committees, amendments can be added to the bills, or a full committee substitute can be added into the bill. We saw this recently last year with Bill 1211, which again talked about the consolidation of PSAPs and just a whole shopping list of different provisions to the bill. But as that though, when it went forward, there was a committee substitute that took out all the provisions to do with PSAPs and 911, which we were fortunate at that point. But again, this is why once we have a bill, we still have to go ahead and look at it to make sure that if changes are made, that they don't change the intent or the requirements of the bill. One of the ones we saw on that also within the past several years was with the 911 Communications Board, that there were some provisions in there. In the original draft, it was good. Some of the amendments and changes that came up would not benefit the counties or 911 personnel. And again, that's where we were able to reach out to those bill sponsors and just explain, again, what looks good on paper, but here are the real world implications of what they're doing. So that's one of the things, that we've been doing as part of this legislative policy group, is making sure that we're also monitoring bills. And also there are other bills out there that we don't know affect us unless we're keeping watch, unless we do monitor these bills along with some of the other organizations, and over the past few years, along with our lobbyists. So obviously for the bill to pass, it must go through both chambers in the exact same form. Any differences obviously must be taken care of and agreed upon before the bill goes to the governor for signature. Now, once it's at the governor's desk, he can sign the bill into law or veto it. And I don't know how many of you here, it's always been great, but Schoolhouse Rock, that cartoon of I'm Just a Bill, is saying exactly what I'm saying, probably just a little bit more entertaining as it happens. But so the governor can sign or veto the bill, and he can return the bill to the legislature to review and to see if there are certain objections. Obviously, normally it's minor, nothing major, to actually see if they can address it and come up with a new consensus to forward the bill. While the legislative session is in progress and a bill is voted on by both houses favorably, it goes to the governor. Once it gets to the governor's desk, if it is there for 7 days with no action, then the bill becomes a law automatically. Again, this is just normally, if you've seen, several hundred bills that are getting passed, obviously it's going to pass, but with the governor traveling around the state, you don't want to hold it where if you can't get to it to sign it. So this way it does look for that automatic passing. Okay. Now, once we have the law, the bill has now been signed or approved through the governor's office. It's now a law. So this is where we have some of the state agencies that we worked with. Um, Florida Department of Management Services, FDLE, Florida Department of Health. They're responsible for enforcing and coming up with the guidelines for and coming up with the rules, the guidelines, and training for each of these bills that are passed so we know what's going on. Again, we look at one of the large ones that we did back in 2012, obviously, was the public safety telecommunicator certification. And that was with Department of Health that had to come up with the curriculum, the registration requirements, certification requirements, all the paperwork that needs to be done, the fees that are charged. So this is why we have to be available and keep in communication with these, especially like I just mentioned three. Those are the ones that focus on EMS, law enforcement, and 911 in the state. But there's several others out there that we can look at. Again, the Florida Emergency Communications Board, um, while their main focus is on the 911 fees and disbursement of those, they are looking at some things that are a little bit more operational in nature recently. So we need to be at those board meetings and see what's going on. Also, the other one that's coming up this week, I believe, is the EMS Advisory Council. Again, that was something that we really didn't have much say in. We were certified through Department of Health, but we didn't have much input. Now, over the past year and a half, um, with the EMS Advisory Council and now the communications committee of that, up until 2 years ago, they really just focused on the technology and the technical aspect of communications and the field radios. There was no talk about public safety telecommunicators or PSAPs. Luckily, I can say now, because of the input from the three organizations, we now have Margaret Hemrick, who oversees who is the committee chair for communications, and we're focused a little bit more on the 911 public safety telecommunicator curriculum, which for the first time since its inception, there was a major overhaul in that curriculum that adds in things that we're dealing with on a daily basis. Number one, the wellness of our telecommunicators. Also looking at some of the next generation technologies that we're facing, ESI nets, video, transcription, and looking at those and making sure that they're part of the curriculum. So when we do have new hires, they're learning what's going on in our centers right now. They're not focused on the technology that was available in 2012. So, and then with the other part of that too is the ongoing rulemaking, again, which is why, in 911, we look a lot towards the Florida Emergency Communications Board. A lot of different rules that come through, and we want to make sure that we have our input and make sure that the best interests of the public, number one, but also the best interests of 911 personnel and operations. Make sure that what's passed actually works in our centers. One of the examples that we can look at for that would be Alyssa's alert. It is a great law and it's needed for school safety. However, there was never talk about how those alerts come into the 911 center. There was a procurement process for different vendors. And unfortunately, some of the vendors, the way they wanted it, the information would come in, but once that information went out to our IT departments, um, it wasn't technically feasible just because you basically had to have an open internet connection into your centers. Some of our centers do not allow that. So that's where we want to make sure that we're involved in this process all along and know where we can and where we should be putting in basically our input and making sure that we're looking at PSAP operations again, with a very high quality of service and also with a standard quality of service across the state. Okay. Oh, sorry about this. I didn't finish this one. Um, but anyway, this is one. Some of the case studies, I think I've just mentioned them. Oh, sorry. Like I said, the public safety telecommunicator certification bill was something that we were behind all along. Chapter 365, again, when they made a lot of changes to the 911 coordinators, excuse me, the 911 board, and they renamed it as the Florida Emergency Communications Board. But we were able to go ahead and meet with the legislature and work with DMS and work with some of the other agencies involved, Florida Sheriff's Association, fire chiefs, to make sure that the bill made sense and to make sure that, yes, while we do work for an agency head, communications is a specialized unit, same as SWAT, same as hostage negotiations, anything out there. Communications is a very specialized unit because of the technology, because of the split-second decisions that people are making. I mean, we do recommendations from CAD, but there's for the first that golden first minute, basically what our 911 telecommunicators are doing. Um, they're making life and death decisions very quickly. And that's where we need to make sure that that is taken into account as we move through the legislature. And that's one of the things that we want to impress upon our lawmakers and the public and some of our fellow public safety organizations out there. So with that, some of the challenges that we've run into, competing priorities. We've seen competing priorities and sometimes conflicting priorities. While it's great, one of the new things, and again, it's, a good purpose is TCPR, but with the amount of training that we get, again, that's something that could just easily be added into our training curriculum, that it doesn't have to be added on top for extra hours. Obviously, the big competing priority is funding. And, when you talk about an agency, a police department, where they need different things. Unfortunately, while we are the first point of access for the public, we're not as much public facing as the field responders. So that is, again is, the priorities, and that's what people are saying they look at, and that's what the public looks at, and that's what the legislators, excuse me, are following. And then obviously sometimes we've seen, this past year in Florida, we've seen legislation that went through very quickly that was just following, national policy. And that's something we have to look at. Or unfortunately, like hot ticket items, hot button items, something comes up. Obviously, anytime there's an incident on a college campus or a high school campus, school safety goes up, as it should be prioritized, but it goes up and people, not to be um, just make them out wrong. But I mean, again, some people want to get legislation out there just to say they did something while it may be legislation that doesn't actually work properly. Um, Again, lawmaker misunderstandings. This is why we want our membership to go out to their legislatures, meet with them, let them know what you do. Even when we start talking about, to have them come in, if you do have any type of event, invite them in. And, if they come in, get them, especially while they're in, not in Tallahassee. Again, from what we've talked to with some of the lobbyists across the state, obviously because of the budget issues that are still going on in the Florida legislature, probably now is not the good time to address them. But as early as July, it may be starting if you have something in your center. Or if they're going to be out at a community picnic, a block party in August, National Night Out. These are the times that you can reach out to your lawmakers. And when we say lawmakers and legislators, do not forget the importance of a legislative aid because they're the ones that do all the research. They're the ones that write up position papers. They know what their lawmaker wants, and then they're the ones that write up, and they're the ones that go out looking for the data, and they're the ones that are doing some of the research. So that's why it's always good to keep communications open with the legislative aides. And one of the things that is always tough is the session's only 60 days. And when we're talking about, if we talk about a change in retirement benefits, we're talking about something that's gonna, has the potential to cost millions of dollars across the state. So that's where sometimes it's very tough to get something through in one session because there is that money amount. And, in today's economy, money is a big factor. We've seen several things with legislation coming up that when we talk about, not to get political, but the idea of, okay, people saying they're due of property taxes. Well, where I work and where, most of you work, most of our budget comes from the property taxes. So where does that money come from? And that's where legislators and agency heads are a little bit hesitant to add anything extra to their budgets. So that's one of the things that why, and again, they have to make these decisions within, I mean, there's time before that they'll have interim sessions before in the fall. But again, we're looking really at just a 60-day window to make a lot of changes. Okay, so for our 911 leaders and for all our 911 personnel, number one, what we're looking and what we're hoping to do, and if there's anything that the organizations can do to help you if you have any questions, number one, knowing about the process. As we know with everything else, even locally, knowing your budget process, knowing your budget deadlines, knowing the priorities of your agency heads makes things easier for you once you get to that. Um, that's part of it. Relationship building. That's where we're saying reach out to your legislators. Make sure you get to know them. Find out who the Senate president and who the House leader is, because they're the ones that are actually going to basically either help pass or stall your bill. I mean, they do have that power of what they do. So that's why we want to make sure they know what we're looking at. And then obviously shaping policy. As we've talked about some of the legislation that's passed, it made sense on paper. Some of it saved money. Some of it had a very good high level purpose, but the day-to-day activities, the actual policies, the actual technologies just did not make sense. So that's why we want to make sure that, this is what we're in for. Um, Speaking on behalf of the organizations, that we're not just here for one piece of legislation. Yes, we do have our priorities, and that is for our public safety telecommunicators, but we're focusing now on all public safety legislation because while we fight for the other ones, there's a lot of these other bills that come along that do affect your day-to-day workplace, and they do affect your wellness with all, the extra technologies that are added in, all the extra steps and processes that we have to do for anything. It does affect our wellness. So some of the resources again to help stay informed and engaged. Um, the Florida legislature, Florida House.gov, Florida Senate.gov, also online Sunshine, which is www.leg.state.fl.us. Is a great, there's also tracking tools there for committees. You can do some keyword searches on committees and finding out, what's going on affecting public safety. Um, the professional committees. Number one, the three organizations that represent the 911 telecommunicators, but also we need to engage with other Florida organizations, Florida sheriffs, chiefs of police, International Association of Firefighters, Florida professional firefighters. I mean, just everybody along with the state boards to make sure that they know what we're doing and to make sure, that we kind of take down any barriers, any kind of misconceptions that there are. And again, to say we're all working for the same thing. We're not looking to take money from, somewhere else in the budget and bring it into 911. We're looking that all of us go to work. We're all paid well for what we do. And like we say, at the end of the day, everyone goes home safe, both physically and mentally. So really quick, and unfortunately, Jen Dana couldn't make it for her part of the presentation. So we will probably do that on June 30th, I believe is the Monday. That will be our next session, and that will be a little bit more about what Jen learned when she went up to Tallahassee. She did a lot of walking around the Capitol building. She went basically knocking on a lot of doors. So she's going to let us know what it was like in Tallahassee and also what different tactics were accepted well and what worked really. So, number one, starting to get involved, joining the organizations, Florida APCO, Florida NINA, Florida 911 Coordinators Association. They're there, that we're here for the information, the training. We're here to represent you as much as we can at every level of government and in the nation, at the national forefront. Staying informed, again, online sunshine. Hopefully let us know what you think about the series. um, Please reach out to me if you think this is useful. Anything that you would like to see, let us know. But again, this is what we're looking at so we can track the bills a little bit easier. Again, we need our training in the background. Same thing, it's kind of muscle memory. The more we talk about this, the more it'll just come naturally once session gets in or once it's start time to go reaching out to our legislators that will know what we should be saying. And then again, direct advocacy, reaching out to your legislator. There's nothing wrong. Again, after you give them a little bit of rest from this session, but let them know. Let them know what 911 does. Again, invite them in. You know, tell them when there was a bad call. Let them know. If you are handing out um, awards, if any of your people get recognized by APCO and NINA, especially with the national conventions coming up, um, yes, do that. But then when you get back, invite them into your center and have them recognize your employee again, but then let them know what goes on day to day and try and do it. This is a good time of year to do it. In summer, we see a lot of different summer activities. Some of us see some spikes in activity, so this is when we need to have them come in. It's great when we invite them in during National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. But again, also, we want them to know what it is every day of the year. When we bring them in during that week, again, like I said, it's not all pizza and balloons. So we have to make sure we can get them there. If you can, probably maybe a legislator, maybe not, um, but a legislative aide. Do they want to come in and can they come in for basically a sit along on a Thursday, Friday, or Saturday night and see what goes on? Reach out to some of your agencies that still do ride-alongs. Check with your agency head, and as part of a ride-along, if they do 4 hours in the car, have them come in and do part of a ride-along is going to be you're going to sit in dispatch and see what happens. Whether it's before or after, but see what that voice on the radio does and everything that they're doing and showing, getting them involved. And again, also with our, fellow first responders, our law enforcement officers, our firefighters, our paramedics, our EMTs, every once in a while, bring them back into the center too, because they may have to sit for a little bit, in the beginning of their training, but they don't go back. And I've done it with some firefighters when they come into a center now, because of a promotion. When they came to the center during their training 10 years ago, the center looked a lot different, and there's a lot more things going on, a lot more duties that are falling into the 911 centers. Um, Again, the staffing survey, if you haven't filled it out, here's a QR code and link. It's also available on Florida APCO, Florida NINA, and 911 Coordinators Association website, Facebook pages. Um, Again, if you have is there any questions at all? Okay. Any questions, any suggestions, if there's anything specifically you'd like to see in these trainings, please let us know. Again, on June 30th at 2 p.m., will be Jen Dana talking a little bit about basically the hands-on experience of Tallahassee and the legislative delegation meetings, and a little bit more about your personal activism and what you're going to be doing, what we may be going to certain areas and asking you to go ahead and represent 911 in your area. Number one, anything that you do with your reaching out to people, again, please check your policies and procedures for your agencies. Um, some do have, no lobbying clauses in there. So make sure you're not going to do anything that's going to get you in trouble. Again, yes, you vote, but if you show up in a legislator's office with a uniform shirt on or with a polo with the logo with the seal or star on it, then at that point they look at you and think you're representing the sheriff. So that's something that we don't want to see anybody get in trouble with that. If there are no more questions, Jody or Kathy, do you have anything to add?
Very hard to add anything to that, Dan. Great job as always. Just asking for everybody, as Dan said, get involved. We're always here if you have any questions or thoughts on how you feel we should proceed, and we'll be here to help try to get this legislative actions in process. Thank you.
And the
Thank
same
you.
from the Florida APCO side. Thanks again, Dan, for the presentation. And please, we just want involvement from the membership, feedback from the membership. And if you have received the surveys, please complete them because it gives us good information to be able to pass on. So thank you.
All right, thank you. And with that, this session was recorded, so it'll be available on social media and on the YouTube pages for Florida EPCO and Florida NINA. Probably be available tomorrow morning. So with that, everybody have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you, Dan.